What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Now, over the history of my channel, I have been very vocal about the fact that I think the Detroit Lions are playoff contenders. I think that they're a much better football team than a lot of people give them credit for, and I think that we will win the division next year. I think it's definitely possible that we win playoff games next year, even after going through a 3-12-1 season. Now, I wanted to go back and look at our three previous playoff games or at least our three previous playoff runs and kind of see what that team did well to make it to the playoffs and, become a contender, and what they didn't do so well in the playoffs to get them kicked out, and compare that to our 2020 Detroit Lions to see how many similarities and how many differences there are between the two teams, to just kind of get a view of how this team is looking heading into the 2020 season. Now, as you can see in the background, there is a sign for my 17th birthday. My neighbors made it for me, and I told them I would put it in the video, so that will probably not be there tomorrow, and I added some stuff over here. But before we do get into it, if you are new to the channel and are enjoying the content, consider liking the video, subscribe to the channel, and sharing with a Lions or an NFL fan that you think would enjoy this type of content. But with that being said, let's get into the actual video. Now, as I said, I wanted to compare and contrast the three playoff teams that have gone to the playoffs under Matthew Stafford. Those teams are the 2011 Detroit Lions, the 2014 Detroit Lions, and the 2016 Detroit Lions. Now, I can obviously do other teams like the 91 team that went to the NFC Championship or any of the other 90s playoff runs. I just thought that these would be the best to compare, as the quarterback is the same and it's more of a recent history that we can look at. Now, looking at the 2012 Detroit Lions and looking at what they did, obviously Matthew Stafford was the quarterback. In 2011, he completed 421 of his 663 passes for a 63.5% completion percentage. He threw for 5,038 yards, 41 touchdowns, and only 16 interceptions. Now, he was the engine of this team, as he always is. The Detroit Lions only ran the ball 356 times. Jahvid Best led the team with 84 carries and 390 yards while only having 2 touchdowns. I mean, this team was a pass-heavy team. They did not run the ball because they did not have the running backs to do it. And while that worked for the regular season and got them to the playoffs, that was what really hurt them and really cost them a chance to make a deep playoff run, because this team was quite good. Now, Megatron obviously led the team with receiving yards with 1,681 yards and 16 touchdowns. Brandon Pettigrew and Nate Burleson also had over 700 yards each. Pettigrew had 5 touchdowns, Nate Burleson had 3. Now, the team was very pass heavy, but it also focused a lot on the defensive line. The team had 41 sacks in 2011, led by Cliff Averill, who had 11 sacks and 6 forced fumbles, and Kyle Vanderbosch, who had 8 sacks. Now, this was a scary defensive line. They had, obviously, Cliff Averill and Kyle Vanderbosch. They also had Ndamukong Suh. They had all these great pass rushers, and that really helped the secondary. The secondary had, I believe, 21 interceptions, which ranked 5th in the NFL. And looking at the names on that secondary, there weren't a lot of great players. Obviously, they were good, but the defensive line really elevated that secondary. They got pressure. They forced the quarterback to make mistakes and, just throw it up. And if you're in the NFL, and you should be able to win a 50-50 ball as a cornerback, but that defensive line really led the team. They were really the strong suit of that team on the defensive side of the ball, and they really carried the defense, while Matthew Stafford and Calvin Johnson carried the offense. Now, looking at that defense, they gave up 3,831 passing yards, which ranked 22nd in the NFL. They gave up 26 passing touchdowns, which ranked 23rd, and as I said, had 21 interceptions, which was 5th. So they gave up a lot of yards and a lot of touchdowns, but they also came up with a lot of turnovers, which is something the Detroit Lions have not done recently. Recently, they've been more of a bend-don't-break defense. They haven't given up, well, last year is the exception, but in 2018, they didn't give up a lot of yards, but they also didn't get a lot of touchdowns, and that's the same as last year, is they gave up a lot of yards and a lot of touchdowns, and they could not get turnovers. So this team was, not very good. The secondary was not great as far as yards given up and touchdowns given up, but they made the team pay. They had a lot of turnovers forced, and that is why they were a great defense. Now, on the rushing side of the ball, they gave up 2,050 yards, which ranked 23rd in the NFL, but they only gave up 10 rushing touchdowns, which was 7th. So as I said, that defensive line was very good. They got a lot of pressure. They weren't great at the rushing game, but they didn't give up a lot of touchdowns on the ground, which is obviously a very good thing. If you're playing defense, you obviously don't want the other team to score. Now, looking at that playoff game, we played against the New Orleans Saints in the 2011 season. In the 2011 season, the Detroit Lions went 10-6. They made it to the wild card round to take on the New Orleans Saints. Now, the Saints ended up winning this game 45-28. It was a close game for a lot of it, and the Saints kind of pulled away at the end of the game in the fourth quarter. Now, in that game, Matthew Stafford threw for 380 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions, while the team as a whole only had 10 rushing attempts for 32 yards and a touchdown, and that rushing touchdown came from Matthew Stafford punching it in on the 1-yard line. So Matthew Stafford contributed to every single touchdown in that game. There was only 32 rushing yards in the entire game for the Detroit Lions. Only tried it 10 times, and a couple of those were Matthew Stafford. So, I mean, we just did not run the ball at all, and I think that was really what led to our downfall. Now, in the Super Bowl era, in order to win a Super Bowl, in order to go on a deep playoff run, you need to be able to run the ball. Look at Derrick Henry and the Titans, right? The rushing king. They were a 9-7 team, and they went to the AFC Championship game and eventually lost to the Super Bowl champion in the Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs, you say they aren't a run-first team. However, in the playoffs, in their divisional round, they rushed for 118 yards. In their conference championship, they rushed for 112. And in the Super Bowl, they rushed for 129 yards. Every single playoff game that they've won, they rushed for 100 yards. They have a very good rushing attack. And while, yes, Patrick Mahomes is the star of the show, he is the flashy quarterback, throws for big yardage, he is an extension of that run game. The run game opens up play action, which is, just gives you opportunities for bigger passing plays. The Chiefs know that they cannot put everything on Patrick Mahomes' plate if they wanted to win a Super Bowl, so they put some on the running back's plate. They made them go for 100 yards. They gave them the opportunity to go for 100 yards, and in turn, they won the Super Bowl because they were a very well-coached football team that ran the ball in the playoffs. Now, obviously, the Detroit Lions have not done that. They haven't had a very good rushing attack in a very long time, but I think that they actually could be a playoff contender this year, as I've said. I think that they're actually better equipped to make a big run in the playoffs than this 2011 team was. Now, looking at the position by position, the quarterback is obviously the same. However, Matthew Stafford is older, he's wiser, he's been in the NFL a lot longer, and he's still putting up amazing production for the Lions. So I would say our quarterback now is better than our quarterback in 2011, even though it's the same guy. He's more experienced, he knows what he's doing, and I think that he is just a better quarterback now. I think he's actually a better quarterback without Calvin Johnson than he was with Calvin, and that says something. Now, the running game is definitely going to be better. Kerryon Johnson has showed that he can be a very good running back if he can stay healthy when he's on the field. He, is a very capable, he's a very good running back. And even last year, only playing in 8 games, he had over 100 touches. He had over 100 attempts at the rushing the ball and was on pace for about 800 yards and 6 touchdowns. We drafted DeAndre Swift, who is going to take some pressure off of Kerryon and take some of those attempts. So Kerryon might not get 100 attempts this year. However, he's still going to get a lot, and then he's going to split that with DeAndre Swift, who's going to get a lot of carries also and have very good production. This team is built to run the ball now. Bob Quinn made that his mission when he got here, drafting 3 offensive linemen in his first draft, drafting Frank Ragnow a few years ago. I mean, he's put a lot of capital in this defense, or this offensive line. He's put a lot of capital into the running game, with Kerryon Johnson being a second-round pick, DeAndre Swift being a second-round pick, Jason Huntley in the 5th after we already drafted a running back. I mean, he's put a lot of capital into this run game, and I think that they are going to run the ball a lot next year. And if they do make it to the playoffs, I think that they could be a contender just solely on the fact that they are going to be able to run the ball better than a lot of other teams, because that's what they are built to do this year. Now, looking at the wide receiver group, obviously, if you lose Calvin Johnson, if Calvin Johnson is not there, you can't say that your number 1 wide receiver is better, because Calvin is arguably the best wide receiver of all time, the most dominant wide receiver in NFL history. However, I think that the wide receiver room as a whole is actually much better than this 2011 team. In 2011, they obviously had Calvin Johnson, but they had Nate Burleson, who had 700 yards. This year, going into 2020, we have Marvin Jones, who's good for 1,000 yards most years. He's a threat to go off for 1,000 yards each and every season. We have a great slot receiver in Amendola. We have a huge play threat in Marvin Hall. We have Geronimo Allison, who is a big body wide receiver. He'll probably play a lot in the red zone. I think he can have a role in this team. We drafted Quintez Cephas, who I really like out of Wisconsin. This wide receiver room is much better than that 2011 team, even if the number one wide receiver isn't quite what Calvin Johnson is. But I think Kenny Golladay is a fantastic wide receiver. Not quite Calvin Johnson-esque, but I actually think he could get there in his career. I think he has the size, the skills. You know, he's very similar to Calvin Johnson in the way that he's built and the way that he wins jump balls. However, he's not quite as dominant. I mean, nobody's ever going to be as dominant as Calvin Johnson. So, obviously, there's that. Now, the front seven is not as good as this 2011 team. Obviously, as I mentioned, the 2011 front seven really pushed this team to the playoffs. I mean, they had 41 sacks. They were amazing. They forced turnovers. You know, they had a lot of forced fumbles, fumble recoveries. They made quarterbacks uncomfortable so that they would throw interceptions, and it was just, you know, a crazy defensive line. I mean, if you look at highlights, this defensive line was so dominant in these couple of years with Cliff Averill and Ndamukong Suh and Kyle Vander Bosch and, you know, all of these guys that were so good for the Lions. And eventually they just could not keep everybody because of the cap space. And, you know, they had to pay Stafford, they had to pay Megatron, they had to let some people go. And this defensive line has kind of fallen apart and hasn't really been that way since. Now, the cornerbacks, the secondary, I actually think are better this year than in this 2011 team. Now, the only thing is, can our defensive line get there? Because it doesn't matter how good your secondary is. Even if this secondary is better than the 2011 one, the 2011 one had production. They took the ball away in the air and really, you know, made quarterbacks pay for testing them deep. And that really starts with the defensive line, as I've been saying. So if the defensive line can't get there, I don't know how good our secondary is going to be, even though I think it is better on paper. Nobody can cover for 5-6 seconds. Nobody can run all day with wide receivers in the NFL because that's just, it's not feasible. Now, my final takeaways from this, I think that this 2020 team is actually better than the 2011 team. I think we can definitely go 10-6. And if we make the playoffs, there's no way we only run the ball 10 times. We're running the ball 20, 30, maybe even 40 times a game. And we are going to, you know, drag out the clock. We're going to keep your offense off the field. We're going to punish your defense. And I really think that this Detroit team, if we make it to the playoffs, is equipped to win a Super Bowl. Because if you look at recent history, recent Super Bowl champions, they've run the ball in the playoffs, and that is what drives them to success. So that is my opinion. That is what I took away while doing research and looking at this 2011 team and comparing it to our team. If you disagree, if you don't think the Lions are equipped to make a playoff run this year, if you don't even think they're going to make it to the playoffs, obviously leave that in the comments below. If you want to wish me a happy birthday, go ahead and do that in the comments below. If you want to give me a birthday present and you know somebody that likes Lions football, tell them to subscribe to this channel and like the videos and watch them. So, with that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you all so very much for watching. Have an absolutely fantastic day. If there is Lions news before tomorrow, I will obviously make a video letting everybody know. But until then, that is all I got for you guys right now. Thank you all for watching. I'll see y'all later. Bye.